Hi, welcome to Training Tuesday. I'm Steve and I'm here at the Dartford Training Centre. Today I'm going to show you how to set the heating curve on the Baxi air source heat pump pre-plumbed controller and on the uSense 2. Why do we set a heat curve? Well, with a heat pump, it's really important to get as low a flow temperature as possible without sacrificing indoor comfort levels. So what we do is we set a high point, which is usually our design outside temperature, sloping down to a cooler flow temperature when we don't need as much heat in the property. Actually, in another video, Ian goes into the fundamentals of what weather compensation is, but the same principles are relevant for controlling a heat pump. So when we access the carousel menu, we scroll along where it says installer, and we press on that, and we go into installation setup, and we click on zone 1 for our first zone heating curve. If we had another zone, we can set a different heating curve for that zone. So what we do is we scroll down to where it says heat curve, and this takes us into this graphic here. So we've got, the first one says max. This is what we want the max flow temperature to be. So if we've designed the heating system to say 50 degrees flow, then we could possibly set a max flow temperature to 50 or even 52, 53, which would mean it would give us more heat if it got colder than what our outside design temperature was. So we can click on that and we can change that up and down to whatever we want it to be. So we're going to set that on 55 here for now. Now when we scroll down, we've got something called the slope. Now this is the angle from what the line is going to go from the high point sloping down to a low point based on an outside temperature. So right now I can see that at -3, I've got 55. So if I click on the slope, we can see that we've got this angle line going down, sloping down in that direction. So at slope 1.5, that's the gradient. We've got -3 at 55, which is a high point, but it's also showing us that at 0 degrees, we've got 50 degrees flow, okay? So that's the angle that it's sloping down, and that's going to continue to slope down to hotter air temperatures outside. All right, now if I was to change the gradient on that curve to 1.6, it's now showing me that at 0, I've got 52 instead of 50, and so on. If I was to go the other way, then it's sloping it down in the opposite direction. I've got 0 at 47. So the installer can set that to anything they want based on this line here, okay? And then finally, we've got our advanced parameters here. So this is if we wanted to change comfort and reduce low points on our curve and maximum flow temperature, which we'd already set on the last menu, okay? So this is how we set the heat curve on the main controller. We can also set the heat curve on the Baxi uSense 2 controller. So if I was to click on the main menu, the Baxi sign on my controller, and I scroll down to where it says installer, when I click on installer, it's going to ask me continue to advanced settings. I'd like to continue. And it now lets me set a heating curve through this. Okay, now everything I was doing here is mirrored there, all right? But the benefit of having the uSense 2 connected to the heat curve is I can actually click on the heat curve and view every single outside temperature all the way down and all the way up to my high point. All the other parameters can be changed through that as well, okay? Finally, when we save what we want our curve to be through the Baxi uSense 2 controller, we have something called control strategy. So when I click on that, it then asks me how we want to control that heating zone. So we can either do outside, which is pure weather compensation, which was there. We've got room, which is just looking at the room temperature. Or we've got room and outside. Now what room and outside will do is it's going to look at the inside room temperature and adjust the weather curve automatically based on the demand from the controller. So for example, if the room is at 20 degrees and we've put the heating up to 22 inside the room, the controller will look at the weather curve and it will say, at this current flow temperature, will I have enough heat to get the room to that temperature? If it doesn't, then it will slightly adjust the curve for a short period in order to get up to the target temperature and then reduce it back down. And it will constantly do this automatically, which negates having to constantly alter the curve because the uSense 2 controller will do it for you. Okay, and then to come back out of that, we just hit the menu button and takes you back on to the main page. So today I've showed you how to correctly set the heating curve on the Baxi air source heat pump pre-plumbed cylinder controller, as well as on the Baxi uSense 2. Alongside that, we've showed you how to select the correct running strategy for the heating zone. For more information, contact your local ASM or go to baxi.co.uk/training.